Okay, fantastic. I think today I sent an email around and said start with I love our alumni. Two alumni, and one of the examples are the two of you, because you're alumni of City, of our undergraduate program, and that's Salima, and Dan Mache, who did his PhD with us. And they're both here. They kind of did not do what most people probably think of traditional psychological areas of either research or employment, that is doing something with mental health or clinical or counseling. No, they're doing something with user experience and user a design of user experience and user what's UI, user experience and user design. Interface. Oh yes. Okay, yes, yeah, UI user interface. Okay, and I think part of this is like why I'm struggling with these, because I don't know much about that. So I'm really excited to learn from you guys. All there is to learn about user UI, UX, so just keep it like that. And the research you're doing and your jobs that you're doing within there. I think I would, if that's good with you, then we would start with Maciej presenting some slides. I think I'll make you guys co-host. And then I also allow that multiple participants can share, and then just start. If you have any questions, this is going to be recorded. Veronica, the first question. Yes, I think by now you probably know. And then we'll just pop them in the chat. And then Maciej, I would just pass the mic to you virtually and ask you to tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hey, cool. Thanks. Thank you for coming, everyone. Nice to meet you, Alima, also. I'm very interested in what you have to say as well.
Yeah, look forward to it.
Yeah, and let me start the presentation. Can you see the
the
slide?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So let me just move this away. Yeah, so I'm Maciej. I'm originally from Poland. And I, like Andreas was saying, I did my PhD at City in London. So for a while, I was a cognitive neuroscientist in academia. So I was doing research, I was publishing papers, but now I am a UX researcher or user experience researcher. And right now I'm based in Lisbon in Portugal, and I work for a company that's called Transperfect. So what is UX research? So like Andreas was saying, there's like a lot of terms maybe in the industry that could be a bit confusing. But in the essence, UX or user experience research is a systematic study of what people, so users, need and want from the products that they're using. It usually refers to digital products, but it can also apply to anything that people are using. So we learn about those needs, we learn about preferences, and we try to apply those insights to build better products, to improve existing products. And I really like this explanation from Nielsen Norman Group. I will share some links at the very end, because there are some very good resources if you want to dig deeper. Alima probably knows them very well as well. But they give a really nice explanation of what UX versus UI is. So if you think about cakes, so how the cake is presented, whether you had sprinkles, like what is the intended flavor of the cake, how it's intended to be eaten with a spoon or with a hand, that's UI. So that the kind of the presentation, that's UI, so user interface, right? But the user experience is going to be what is the actual experience of people interacting with this cake, right? So they take a bite, what is the actual taste? Do they like this taste? Do they find it easy to eat, or like it's like very messy? Is that taste really supposed to be, is it taste to them what it was supposed to be? So in the essence, like user interface is what you present and what you give to the users, and user experience is how they actually interact with it, right? So yeah, so a little bit of my background. I don't know if that explanation is clear. You can ask me more about it. I have to say that it can get very like subtle as well. So, but you can think of user experience as something broader than user interface, right? So user experience research can, for example, can feed into user interface to make the user experience better, if that makes sense. So Well, my background, so I did psychology, undergraduate psychology at University of Aberdeen in Scotland. Then I did, like I said, the PhD again in psychology at City. And my thesis was had to do with electroencephalography recordings. So kind of entering the cognitive neuroscience area, trying to figure out how brain works. And then I became a postdoc in the same topics in cognitive neuroscience in Lisbon. And then I transitioned to UX. And I think that's kind of like far away, like so I'm learning about the brain, and now I'm, just like listening to people like how they like to use different digital products. But the fact is that the skills and experience that you get by doing research, academic research, by doing PhD, or even learning things on psychology undergraduate degree. I think someone has to mute.
Okay, I found it.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Yeah, so all those skills are actually applicable to different fields like US. So Andreas was saying that the traditional things to do after psychology is maybe to do clinical psychology, for example, but there's actually lots of things that are valued in different fields. So for example, all those quantitative methods or statistics that I learned, some programming, even publishing papers, collaborating with others, presenting. So all that you learn, even during the psychology degree, this is very valued. And I have to say, even things that you might hate about psychology. So if you hate statistics, for example, this kind of gives you an advantage as well, because I kind of mentioned like, yeah, I can do stats, I can do, I know what p-value is, and they're like, oh, wow, yes, this is exactly what we need. And you're like, but why? But this is the thing, we take it for granted because it's given to us in courses, but it's actually all those kind of like hard skills like this and the soft skills that you learn in psychology are also applicable to different things. So yeah, so as a UX researcher, I work at TransPerfect. It's a big company that mostly does B2B, so business to business products. You might not heard of them, but they're kind of everywhere. So for example, if Lego wants to translate the packaging into, I don't know, 60 different languages, they need to use a lot of translators to do it. This have to be reviewed. So for that, the company that I work in, created some digital platforms that enable people to do it more efficiently. So kind of the context is new, but the skills that I'm using are similar. So it's a matter of applying those skills somewhere else. So in terms of how the research as a UX researcher actually looks like, and I have to say, because I only started in January, right? So I'm still pretty new to UX. But what I mostly use is qualitative research methods in my day-to-day, which means I conduct interviews with the users. So like with the Lego example, for example, I was interviewing product managers that were managing interpreters, translators, and I was just kind of shadowing them. They would show me how they use the products. They would share their screen and talk about their experience. I also do prototype testing. So designers do a prototype of a website, for example, because I know, let's make the buttons bigger, or let's change the navigation of the page a little bit differently. And so my role as UX researcher is to check whether this will actually make the user experience better, right? Because, so what do you have without UX? Without UX, you have the designer's experience, you have you have beliefs of, about how the users will interact, how the users will like it, but you don't have really hard data to confirm that, right? And as you probably know from psychology, people are often biased. We like the things that we make ourselves. So I've came across product managers that were, working on this product and giving to the users, and then they were really surprised, why people don't use that? Why do they hate it? Why do they complain? It's because they didn't have this outside, more objective view on this. And this is what UX research is supposed to do, to give you the data on how people actually use the products, so that we can improve them. So relating to that, also write research plans. So maybe they are a bit different than academic research plans, but I do come up with hypotheses. The hypothesis could be that people would prefer, let's say, I don't know, different color or different layout of buttons over another one. So then I test those hypotheses. I analyze the data in qualitative research methods. That would mean that I will look at the transcript of the interview, tag it. I will try to cluster the responses. I would do A/B testing, which means comparing like two different designs. Then I summarize this. I write the research reports. Again, they can be similar to what you're doing in psychology degree, but maybe they're more, sometimes they're more broad and they have to be tailored to the audience. And then I just present them to stakeholders. Stakeholder is kind of a key term in the industry. You might have heard it before, but it basically means stakeholders, anyone that will be interested in your research, right? So that could be designers, that could be product managers, that could be just managers of the company in general. So there's a lot of presenting and talking about what you did, why it matters, and the key is also to show something that is actionable, another industry term, which means can we actually, do something with it, and what can we do with it? So more broadly, for example, right now I have one kind of like bigger project that I lead, but I also have smaller projects where I don't have like a direct input, so I don't do the interviews, but we have a team of designers that do the interviews, but they are not user experience researchers, so their experience in doing research is more limited. And then that's where user researcher can also come in, and I do kind of like mentoring. So I look at the research plans. Are your questions specific enough? I help them out during initial interviews to make sure that they're not asking leading questions. I look at the reports to see if they're like clear enough, and so on. Also, what I do, because we're actually a team of two at this company, it's a big company, but they only introduced UX research last year. So there's a lot of things that just like not exist. So we have to strategize a little bit with my senior user researcher. So we talk with managers and we say, look, we need this to be able to do the research more efficiently. And we come up with some plans and kind of we propose them to the company managers and directors to improve that state of things. Yeah, so as I said, a big part of my job is also meetings. I think that's everywhere, so I have to communicate with stakeholders. I often have to convince people that they need research as well, which can happen if the research in a company is new. That kind of speaks to the fact that especially product managers, they really like their products and they're experts in them, but they don't have this like objective outside view. But it's also, you also have to have some diplomatic skills to be able to communicate to them, look, there's better way of doing things because our data shows that. So we often have to kind of convince people about the value that we bring to the company and to the whole process, right? So there's a bit of convincing that kind of also do when you write research reports in psychology or in academic papers. You're convincing people about your results. Why do my results matter? Why you should be interested in them? Why is this important? So this is also what I do, just again, in a bit different context. One of the challenges is also handling multiple projects. And a difference to what I used to do in academia is that in academia, you can have a research project that goes on for 2 years, for example, right? Or you're doing your master's thesis, that's the whole project goes for a year. But here I have to plan, conduct, and like finish something like within a month or even within 2 weeks in some cases. So the pace is like slightly quicker than in academic research. And you also often have to handle multiple projects. So like organizing myself, being able to keep track of parallel things that are happening. That's also something that I learned in psychology and in my PhD as well, because we also do like multiple things and we have to organize ourselves So this is an important soft skill that we sometimes take for granted, but it's super important once you start the career. And yeah, how I got into UX, basically at some point I decided that I want to put my career in a bit different direction.
Could I jump with one question before you? That's very good. Like, absolutely love it. It's great. And some of the things are just like, oh, I always tell it my students, but they never believe me. That's great. It's like, oh, but watch this video. Manche says it too. Could I just, like, I think Yasmin had a good question before, and we might not come back to that. So maybe Alina, you can let us know what you think. It's like, is there actually, because it seems like everything you were saying is like, oh, I guess I could do that, I could do that, I could do that. But then is it like one thing I was wondering, because I don't know anything about like which buttons people prefer or anything like that. Do you use like insights from psychology, like knowledge that you gained throughout your education, or is it more the methods and less the content? Could you talk a little bit about that? How much do you use kind of like academic literature? Do you use any academic literature?
Yeah, so in my case, I have to say it's mostly the methods, but it's only because I'm kind of like new to the company, right? But actually the insights from psychology itself, especially behavioral science, you know, like you might have heard of like study of nudges, like or like mental models. This is all applicable to UX, and that kind of depends like what place you're actually working in, because maybe you're like once you're more senior roles, you have like more freedom to actually try to implement some of the models of from that stem from academic psychology into the work directly. But also I would say, even for me, so it's methods, but for example, yeah, I kind of like think of a specific model. So, okay, so in my case, it's mostly methods, but it's kind of expected of me that like at some point I'll be able to use the academic knowledge, more kind of like theoretical knowledge into my job as well. And there was something else that just like slipped my mind I wanted to say, and I forgot. Maybe it will come back. Yeah, yeah, it will come back, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
That's good. It's really good. Alima, do you want to jump in, or like do you want to wait till your turn? I don't know.
Yeah, I can do. Yeah. So yeah, with me, because I work as also mainly as a designer, research papers. I mean, I would mainly look at sort of the insights that a user researcher or a UX researcher would find, and I'd sort of justify my designs. So maybe if someone preferred one type of button over another, then I'd say, oh, this is the reason why, and I'd sort of fight my corner. But for example, if the client was like, oh, I really like this, or I really want this design, then I'd say, oh, but our research showed this. That's sort of how I would pick between different designs. I'd go back to the user researcher or the UX researchers and see what their input is.
Okay, that's very good. Okay,
that's a good point. And I have I should also say that there's actually I don't know how it's called, but there's like a UX research journal as well that kind of like publishes papers that are related to user experience, like user design. So again, that's maybe more applied, like psychological knowledge is more like systematic studies. So we have also like publications that we can then use. And yeah, and I guess it's difficult to answer because, like Alima was saying, that kind of depends also on the specific design, and if the stakeholder wants like deeper explanation why. And then maybe with a specific question, we can actually find something in the literature. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some example, but yeah, for example, I think like in design, I know there's a strategy of kind of like showing how many like other people are using the product because of this kind of like, you know, herd behavior. So if someone else in my circle is using something, then I'm more likely also to at least try it, right? So we can go kind of like in those directions. So I would say it's definitely useful.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, maybe you tell us how you, how you got there. I think you wanted to talk about some, like on your last slide, Maciej, maybe, and then, yes.
Yeah. So I got some resources there because the way I got into UX, because the context is different, I had to learn more about it. And these are like three main resources that I was using. And why is that important? It's important because when you try to enter UX, it's very important that you show that you understand the jargon, you understand the kind of like the environment, right? Because often they talk about things that you're able to do, but they just call them differently, like A/B testing, for example. Like, what is that? But that just, that's, you can just do like t-test because you're comparing two variables. That's it. They just call it different, right? So very good resource. There's a YouTube channel, Iona Talks. So she's a UX researcher, I think at Meta. So she's got like a bunch of videos that go from like very kind of specific detailing to like more broadly about what UX is. That's very helpful. The Nielsen Normal group has very good resources to read. They have like short videos as well. And then there's also this on Coursera, you have Google UX design certificate. It's a large course that you can like enroll for free. It's large, but for example, I did only modules from the UX research. And if you do them, you will realize that's like this, not that much like complicated things, but it tells you a lot about how people talk about things in UX versus how you used to talk about them in academia or like doing your degree. And this is also a very good course as well because they talk you through exercises. So they give you an example interviews, like short interviews with people using an application on a mobile phone. And you're supposed to take notes and like see if what you did kind of like matches like what the instructor is like kind of getting from there. So that's a very good one, and you can access for free. So yes, to get to UX, I basically improve my knowledge in general. I was trying to network, so whenever there was a UX design or UX research event, I would just like pop out as kind of like imposter, like, hey, I'm an academic. I don't really belong here, but it will be great to meet you guys and see what happens. So through that, I met some people. I also approached people on LinkedIn. That's another thing that's very important. You maybe heard about it, like about approaching people on LinkedIn. There's some etiquette that you should follow, and there's like lots of resources online about this. But it often led me to get referrals for some jobs. So for example, I would find a job that seemed interesting. Then I would see if someone I know knows the person that works there, and then I would try to get in touch with them to talk about what they do, and then just say I would like to apply, and they would often just kind of like say like I can refer you, because there's incentive for them as well, because in a lot of companies, if you refer someone and they got hired, they get like a monetary bonus. So it's kind of a normal thing to do, but you have to remember some basic etiquette and remember that people are generally busy. So also don't get discouraged if people just ghost you, because that happened to me a lot of times. So yes, I think with me it was basically just like learning about it and applying. At some point I was lucky to land an interview, and because I was someone that was coming from academic background, and maybe there would be like something similar for people coming without any job experience, they had to make sure that I would fit. So I had to say why I want to transition, why I want to enter this particular field, what am I doing to know more about the field, and that's when like those resources, for example, come up. But I think number one thing that helped me to land a job was to get practical experience in the first place. So you might get some internships, like something like this. But what I did, I registered on one of the freelancing websites, and I did literally just one project. I did a survey for someone. I designed a survey and I sent it, and I analyzed data from a survey. I got just a little bit of money out of it, but that wasn't the point. The point was to put on my CV, okay, this is the project that I did. So look, I'm coming from psychology background, and I did, interact with a client, and I delivered something to them, So getting this experience, this is one of the way you can do that. You can like try to freelance. Maybe you can do a project, I don't know, maybe some other company, you can do project on your own, but of course it's always better to get a little bit of money as well out of this. So yeah, and that's how I got in. So I guess, so it just means applying, learning about the field, and trying to get some hands-on experience as well.
Okay, fantastic. So maybe Alima, you could talk a little bit. I don't know if you have slides or don't have slides. Is it as a UI and UX person that people's like, oh, I'm curious to see your design slides, or is that not something?
My design slides are not really that good.
I can also tell I'm not a designer, right? Because I just use the PowerPoint.
No, they look good. They look good. Okay, yes, I think you should be capable of sharing your screen, but it was really, really good. I think there's some questions that came up, but I feel like it would be good to kind of see, because I think first what Alima has, because I think this will also kind of help us to, like probably she says things that might address some of these points, and then we talk about this later. Okay, fantastic. Alima, please take it away.
Yeah, sure.
We can see your slides.
Yes, okay. You can see my slides? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me, Andreas. So yeah, I'll just get right into it. So I'm just going to talk a bit about my career. So I graduated from psychology from City in 2021. So I'm currently working as like a hybrid roles in design and research. And yeah, I'm currently working in a consultancy, which is quite interesting because I get to work on different projects, and I get to sort of navigate my own career if I want to go down more a research role or a design role. So that's been quite interesting. And yeah, what else? So sort of how I got into UX is that I was a bit uncertain of like what I wanted to do after I graduated. I didn't really want to do like become a psychologist or a counselor, or maybe go down academia, and I always wanted to do something a bit more creative. So one day I just stumbled across a random video about like different careers in psychology, and UX came up. And I found it really interesting, and I just thought, oh, let me research into it. And yeah, that sort of sparked my interest. So I'll just move on to the next page. So I think magic, if I pronounce, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, okay, great. I think you covered quite well what is sort of user experience. But yeah, I'll go over it a bit more. So it sort of refers to an interaction like a user has with a product or service. So this example here, this definition is by Don Norman. So he's like the father of UX, or human-computer interaction. And human-computer interaction is sort of like the academic term for user experience. So there's loads of research papers on there. There's also masters in human-computer interaction. So it's quite an interesting field. There's also like conferences like called CHI, that looks at human-computer interaction. And so UX is sort of looks at more of the industry, and you're building like products and services like apps, websites, portals. So yeah, and UX is really useful across loads of different industries. Just giving an example of what a bad UX is. So for example, let's say you're trying to check out of something and you're finding really hard to, find the buttons. Yeah, so if you're finding it really hard to find the buttons, or you're finding it really hard to check out on an app, that would be a really bad example of bad UX. An example of good UX is everything will be really easy, really seamless. You wouldn't have a problem with checking out using the app. Yeah, and I guess I'll go to the next page. So yeah, UX, it sort of focuses on the user's needs, and we're putting the user first. So that could be different things like accessibility. You might have dyslexia. You might be colorblind. We have to take all these things into consideration when we're sort of designing, like a screen, pages, or website, things like that. So yeah, I'll talk a bit about my role. So as I said before, I'm working as a bit of a, hybrid role. So in my design role, I'm sort of creating different like websites or apps or portals. So what I sort of mainly start off is I'll do sort of like design thinking sessions where a few of us will come together. So that could even be researchers or other people from other disciplines come, and we'll sort of put all our ideas together. From that, I might create a wireframe. So that would be like a really rough outline of a website or an app. And then from that, I might create a prototype. So that would be like me being able to, give like a really good example of what the actual final product would be after it's been developed. So you can go to the next screen, click buttons, things like that. Other things that I also do is I look at user journeys. So for example, how you might check out something, click something, confirm something. Other times I'll have to, follow a design pattern. So some of the people that I work with in the consultancies, we have loads of different clients. So they might have a specific branding, color, they want specific buttons and specific formatting. So I have to make sure I really follow that. So that sort of falls under user interface, where I'm following, templates and, making sure the designs are really seamless. And yeah, a lot of the time we have to take into accountability, accessibility. So one of the projects I'm currently working on, it's a public project. So there will be people from like the whole country that are using that product and website. So we really have to make sure things are, accessible for everyone, and everyone can really use the product and there isn't an issue. So on the research side of things, so that's something that I'm quite new at in my current role. So I've been in the role for about 10 months. So currently I'm like recruiting participants. I've completed consent forms, information sheets, followed ethical guidelines. And those are all really things that I learned. I'm an undergraduate, so it wasn't really that difficult, and I didn't really feel like I've been thrown in the deep end. There's actually us designers who are working without any researchers on doing the research. So that's been quite interesting and a new experience. But yeah, I don't feel like I've been out of place because I've got all this experience from undergraduate. So yeah, I definitely recommend, if you guys can, like before you finish university, to take part in different things like the university might provide. So with Andreas, I took part in Prep at City. So that was a really good example of getting my research skills up. I also took part in the micro placement. And that was really useful, just getting a bit of experience in any industry, just testing the water, seeing what you like. So yeah, if you can, go have a look around, do some internships, things like that. So yeah, I'll just show you a bit of an example of some of the designs that I've done. And this is just an example, so I can't show you exactly like client work because I'm not allowed to. So this is sort of storyboarding. So I'd sort of think about like a scenario and I'd sort of write it. And this is just for like a random, like a Subway sandwich app. And then yeah, I do like a paper wireframe. So I do like a rough drawing on paper, and then I do like a low fidelity design, like a wireframe. So this would be really basic, where I'll just have like, shapes and a rough idea of how I'd want things to look. And then I'd create it into a bit of a like an interactive prototype. So you can click things, click buttons and move on to different pages. So yeah, that's sort of like a rough idea. And then this would sort of move on to like a more like a colorful screens and make it like a proper interactive app or website. I guess just going back, I guess I'll talk a little bit about how I work like in a consultancy. So for example, with creating designs, I will sort of take different requirements from people. So for example, a user researcher or UX researcher, I might be like, oh, hey, this is what I found. The user said that they hate this button and they really don't like it. Or what can you do about it? So I'll go back and redesign it. And then I'll discuss it with other people in the team. So I'll discuss it with other researchers. I'll discuss it with content designers. So they'll write like the content of things like, oh, does this make sense for the user? Do they understand what we're trying to show them? And then I'll show my like prototype to developers, and then the developers will say to me, oh yeah, that looks great, we can totally do this. Or they say, oh no, we're not capable, or we can't do this, this is too complicated, or it'll take too much time. And then, yeah, after, you know, we've finalized everything, it'll sort of be created and it'll go live, and then you'll have your live app or website and things like that. So if you guys are like interested in a career in UX, there is so many different career paths. So, you know, you can be a UX designer, UI designer. So UI designer will focus more on sort of like making everything look nice and pretty, formatting a page, things like that. These user researchers, the service designers. So service designers, they sort of look at the end-to-end journey that someone might go through. So they'll create all these really fancy apps and look at all the different paths that you can take across an app or a website. There's other things called research ops, which is quite interesting. So that's where you basically sort of standardize all the research material that you're going to be giving out to participants. So we have a research ops in one of the areas that I work in, and they sort of standardize all the ways that we would have our consent forms, our information sheets, how we're going to conduct our research. And this is like quite a good up and coming new role that a lot of people are going into, especially from psychology. So a lot of the other my other colleagues who came from psychology backgrounds, either they're user researchers or they've become research roles in research ops, or they've gone into UX design. But all of these roles, they really interlink with one another. So you'll either do one or another, or you'll take part in working with any of these other people. And yeah, and sort of kind of a good resource if you want to have a look at learning a bit more about UX design or research is to go to the Nielsen Norman group. So I said previously how Don Norman, who's like the forefather of human computer interaction. So he actually I think he's like the co-founder of this. So that's a really good website to have a look at information. There's also courses on there, but it's quite expensive. So I'm not sure if I recommend it because there's loads of free resources out there. There's Coursera, which is a website that I actually use at my company for like training, like UX training. And one of the sort of courses that I've done is the Google UX design certificate as well. And that was really beneficial for me. So when I interviewed, I actually used that as, you know, some of my examples of what I've done. Some other great ones on Coursera is like the one by University of Michigan. And there's loads of other ones. And this is just like a really small fee, I think. And there's loads and loads of UX resources. So on the design side of things, on a day-to-day basis, I use a platform called Figma. So that's where I do my designs, I create my prototypes, and then I'll share that with the team. There's other ones that you can use like Sketch and Adobe XD. They're all really, really good platforms. So if you do want to go into design, then I do recommend you maybe try and learn one of these platforms. There's loads and loads of YouTube videos out there. It's really not that complicated. Honestly, you just have to spend a few hours every now and then and you'll get the hang of it. So yeah, that's sort of the different careers and sort of trainings that you can do to get into UX. And sort of different roles. So when I was sort of looking into going into UX, I was finding it a bit difficult because a lot of these roles required you to have a bit of experience, and I really had no experience in design or research. So what I had to look at is sort of any graduate schemes. And a lot of these graduate schemes, they don't really expect you to have a design background. They just sort of want you to see like an interest from you, and they really want you to be really passionate about working in design or research. So that's how it was in my company. I don't have to come from like a psychology background or a research background. So these are some examples like Ocado, IBM, BBC, NHS Digital, Deloitte and M&S. And these are some graduate schemes that I think might be really beneficial if you come from any type of discipline and you really want to go into UX design and research. You can definitely apply. I would also recommend, if you can, to maybe start creating a portfolio. So you can create a portfolio for both design and research. It doesn't have to be, you know, just for design. You can, you know, have like a play around or an example, a research project, like a hypothetical one, and put that into some slides and use that to present. You can also do that also with design, but it's not exactly necessary. I don't have a portfolio, but it's always good to get in practice and know like if you really want to do this. And yeah, that's really it from me. So if anyone's got any questions, yeah, let me know.
Amazing. Maybe you can stop sharing and then we just have a
Oh,
chat.
yes.
I have like about a million questions.
Okay.
So just to kind of, so you basically, I mean, you finished your undergrad and
Yeah.
then you went on to a graduate, like what's it called, scheme.
Yes.
Okay. And so, because I think there are a lot of things, there's like, I don't know how to do wire types, prototypes. I think I know Figma, I know kind of a little bit, but it's like, I don't know, like, but that's basically, you went on and then the whole design bit, which is not covered in psychology at all, right? So, that's what you learned on that scheme.
Yeah, so at my company, they're really open to training us, giving us a lot of support. They allow us to go on courses, they pay for courses, they give us all these platforms like Coursera, things like that. So they really, really want to support us and let us develop into whatever path that we would want to go into. So I initially sort of interviewed for a research role because that was, my strength. And I talked mainly about, my psychology undergraduate, my research experience. But because I joined into sort of just a design department and we have loads and loads of designers and researchers, I just thought, oh, if I've already had experience in research, why not just go in for design and see how it is? So yeah, I learned everything as soon as I joined, and I'm being supported really, really well. So I learned everything like using Figma, all the design like platforms, tools, how I'm supposed to do everything. Like they completely supported me from the beginning, and they're still supporting me now. So I wouldn't be worried that you don't know how to design or you don't know how to use this platform, because a lot of these times these companies will really support you because they know that you've come from an undergraduate and you haven't had any previous experience in whatever role that you've picked. They'll really support you, and they know that they've got to help you. But yeah, we're sort of working currently now like as a graduate team to sort of standardize things, so maybe put some training in place and things like that. So depending on what graduate scheme you go to, it might be a bit more structured. They might do rotations like 6 months on research, 6 months on design. Just really depends.
Okay, amazing. I think, could you just, did you have any kind of artistic background? I think Yasmin was wondering.
Absolutely not, no. Okay. I just wanted to go into something more creative, yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, it probably doesn't hurt, but it doesn't seem to be required. Can I just, I think I have, somebody asked, okay, I think it's easier somehow to imagine how a portfolio for design looks, right? That's kind of like portfolio. Oh, here's my portfolio. How does a UX portfolio look like? Like, is that like, I think you said there are slides. You basically would have like, oh, hypothetical, they want to know this is what we did, or how would you kind of do that?
Yeah, so what you would focus in like a UX research portfolio is you wouldn't really focus on like your end goal. Even in design portfolio, you'd sort of keep talking about the process that you went through. So you might think about sort of things that you might write about, things that you've thought. You might write about like how you would approach it. If you're going to do interviews, are you going to do a usability test? So that's where someone comes in and they'll maybe play with a prototype and you'd observe them. You'd ask them questions if you're going to do A/B testing. So you might just maybe have a scenario and you just see how you approach the scenario. So I wouldn't be worried about, you don't have any research to prove at the end. It's just the process of how you got to do the research. That's mainly what you'd focus on for a UX research or even design portfolio.
I think, okay, so there's another really good, I think, Naman, let us know if that kind of answered your question. There's another really, just before we kind of move on, because another really good, Bushra asked a really good question. I just want to kind of, oh, there's like my AI detects that I'm raising my hand. That's like, so there's basically Maciej kind of like, okay, like, we can talk about this at the very end. I think some people are really interested. You're kind of fed up with academia, I switch. Okay. And then you did a graduate scheme. The people around you, like, some people do actually masters in computer human interaction? So would that be more for people who are into UI design, or like shouldn't you do a master's? Is there like, who are the people that's like, we would say like, okay, for them, it would be really good if you're interested in that. Like, I think in many of our talks, we had last 3 weeks ago, somebody talked about marketing. She's like, don't do a master's, right? I'm just kind of trying to see is like, what's from your experience and point of view, is there any value in these masters, or should you not waste time and money on that? Like, you know,
So,
I mean, it's your
yeah.
opinion. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So actually, if I didn't get into a career into UX, I was actually thinking about doing human computer interaction masters. And the reason why I would suggest that masters only is because it really sets you up well. Like, they give you a really good solid foundation. They cover everything that you need to know, and you'll get to like the bigger companies. Like, for example, you want to be employed by TikTok or Facebook, Instagram, they have a requirement that you have to have a master's in human computer interaction. So the medium or lower companies, they will take you without, I guess, having a master's in human computer interaction. So the one at UCL is one that I looked at.
Okay, yes. Oh, the UCL. Okay, I was about to ask.
So that has a really good academic background. However, City has one, human computer interaction, and that has a placement opportunity. So you can actually extend it to 15 months or something like that, and you can do an internship. So I was actually previously looking at that, and like loads of companies like Microsoft and other companies, they'll actually take you on while you're doing your master's dissertation. So if you do want to do a master's in human computer interaction, definitely look at one that's got an internship role like attached to it, because that will be really beneficial. And I think they sort of push your dissertation deadline. But you don't necessarily have to have a master's in human computer interaction to get into UX. So one of my previous colleagues, she's left now, she did have a master's in human computer interaction, and we were working the exact same role, exact same grade, pay, everything like that. So you don't necessarily have to, but I guess that's a choice that you can decide on if that's something you want to go forward with.
I would just add that it's what you're saying is really important, because it's not about like so first thing, it depends on the company, because some companies just like to see masters. Some companies even post job adverts when they say we want someone with PhD from psychology. So I saw that, for example, in some of the adverts from Meta. But the thing is, if you're just graduating, like Alima was saying, make sure that this master's gives you some practical experience that you can put on your portfolio or your CV, because to be honest, that the practical skills you can learn them, you can get like fundamentals of it on your own, and then you kind of learn on the job. But what masters can give you is it can give you a network. That's very important. It can give you a practical experience through internships. So I would look at not the masters in like, you know, in general, but like, does it give you like practical experience that then you can use in your CV? If you have opportunity to do it and it's a good master's program that gives those things, then I think it can be helpful. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't apply before getting that master's, right? Because you might end up getting a job and then you don't really need that master's because you will learn on the job. So the answer is, I guess, it depends.
Yeah. I always like think like a student, should I do my master's or should I apply? And I say, yes, you should do both. It's like, okay, so that's really good. Sorry, Alima, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say there's some really great internships. So previously, I think maybe 2 years ago, there weren't many opportunities for UX internships or graduate schemes, but now there's loads and loads. And I think loads of students are getting really interested in UX, and they even have like BSc in UX. So I think definitely if you're on your first year or second year and you're thinking about going into UX or something you want to, you know, go into, there's loads of like few short internships, and definitely apply to those because they'll be really great and amazing.
Because I think that connects a little bit to what Bushra is asking. I think she's asking, is it better to have experience to get a job? I think it's obvious that it's always better if you have experience, like practical experience. But let's say you are like me, you have zero experience. And I think Maciej said like he just kind of learned a little bit and then he posted his services on whatever Fiverr or something like that to get some experience. What are other strategies to kind of like, if I've so would it be good to, if I'm a psychology student I'm trying to get some experience, or like an undergraduate student, whatever program, would I first kind of start learning a little bit about it and then see if I can find like some internships, or like what would you recommend from like year 2 when I'm thinking how to spend my summer? What would I say? Yes, what would I prioritize?
I'll definitely prioritize knowing what UX is, sort of the discipline that you want to go into, if it's design or research, and why you want to really like go into it. They really look for, well, in my experience, they really look for like having an amazing and great passion for UX, and you know, you really want to go into it. And I think your passion, even if you've got a lack of experience, can really shine and go through and like prove to them that you have a really good understanding. If you are like sort of looking at different internships or trying to get experience, it might be beneficial to, you know, do a course online, like a free one, or, you know, like anything really, like just to show your passion. So yeah, I mean, just don't stop applying. I think keep applying, keep learning to like different internships or jobs. But yeah, keep going and keep building your interest. And look, your current experience that you've got now, if you've done internships that might not be related, you can always apply something to the interview process. Don't think some of your previous experience, just because it's not design or research related, is going to go down the drain. Like I spoke about loads of random things, even my retail job, and I got my job in UX. So yeah.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. I think so we're kind of like, we're 5 minutes left. I think several of our PhD students would love to know, maybe, and we keep it at the end, like, why did Maciej leave academia? And I think it would be really good to know. One thing I selfishly would be interested is, like, I think a lot of, like, when companies work with me, I felt like, okay, they come from kind of like behavior insight teams, like these, like within teams that use psychology to increase whatever, better meet the needs of the employees or their customers or consumers. And I think it sounds a little bit like, because like for one project I was approached where it's like, oh, we have problems because our employees don't want to engage with the new AI bot. Okay, for you, so why? And it's like, it seems like they didn't ask the research design or research experience kind of research team, but they ask how the behavior insight teams. Is that something where it's like overlap? So I don't know if you have anything to say about that. Yes.
I mean, I guess kind of depends on the they call it like UX maturity of the company, whether they have like a dedicated like UX research team that has like already like experience like researching that, and if not, they're not mature, if they don't have like researchers, or they don't have capacity to research that, and they need some outside consulting, so they will like go on and ask you. Yeah, so that kind of like depends on the company. Yeah, but the more mature in terms of UX the company is, that kind of stuff will be done like kind of like in-house, and they would look to employ someone that already, for example, has knowledge in psychology, so they would look out even like for ex-academics to kind of like fill that gap, to, you know, to put their company, you know, like in front of others by knowing those things. Because I think there's increased kind of people start to notice that like what we learn from psychology, from cognitive psychology, even from neuroscience, can be actually put to practice and can be like beneficial. So yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if that answers that. Yeah, but
yeah. Because I think you mentioned there's like also nudges, and that's kind of like where I felt like, oh, what's the with these nudge teams within companies, right? Yeah, Alima, sorry, you like, do you have anything you feel like to add, or maybe that's like?
I think, yeah, it was covered well by Maciej.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I think so if that's okay, Alima, I don't know, I don't see any other questions, but I got several questions about I think that relate to kind of like why Maciej left academia.
Right.
Alima, if that's boring for you, feel free to kind of leave. But I know that many of like the PhD students are really interested in that. But that was like, yeah, thank you so much. That was super helpful for me, and I hope for the others as well. I mean, it's not primarily not about me, but you know, it's my egoistical perspective. So Maciej, could I ask you, I think one of the questions I got was, did your PhD have any value? It's like, okay, so it sounds like you left, like, is it like, what was the value of your PhD? And I feel like, I don't know, from my interaction from people who left academia, what I know, I think there's a lot of value, but then the PhD student economy is like, it sounds like there's no value. What's your take on that? Was it valuable?
It definitely has value. By Alima.
Yes. Alima, could you share your slides with me?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
There were so many really cool stuff in there.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you, everyone. Thanks, Andreas.
Yes, that was
Bye,
amazing.
Maciej. Yeah.
Bye,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Okay. I had to drop off soon as well, but like to answer the question, I think that PhD has value. And you will see that in big companies like Meta or Google, they value people with PhD, especially from psychology, human-computer interaction. They take those people on board because of what they bring. With smaller companies, maybe that's not necessarily the case, but still, for example, in my experience, my PhD has brought value to the company. And it wasn't so obvious to me. Okay, so I had some like research experience, and obviously, if you do PhD, you have a lot of research experience. You have a lot of experience with dealing with stakeholders who, for example, your PhD supervisor is your stakeholder. You have experience writing grants, which is also like talking to people and trying to convince them about things. We have, thanks to PhD, you have stuff to put on your portfolio. You just have to phrase it differently, but it definitely has value. Whether you have to do PhD to go into UX, like, no, you don't have to. And maybe even you shouldn't. if you already know, if you're graduating from psychology and you know that you want to go to UX, you don't really need a PhD. But having said that, it doesn't mean that the PhD doesn't bring anything, because it's really, it's valuable. The amount of research experience and managing people also, because you manage students and so on, you teach, all of that has a lot of value. We as PhD students might take it for granted because it's just in academia, it's expected, it's normal. No one praises you for the fact that, you know, you are doing a PhD, but you were also doing those projects, and you were also teaching, and you were also doing that. It's normal. You were surrounded by other PhD students who do the same thing. But if you frame it well, then this is going to be valued. And I find that's very, very useful to me in my current job. And I really have to drop off. But why I left academia? A lot of reasons. So I think first reason is that I wanted to stay in Portugal. And with research, I think you don't have so much control about where you live, because there's like lots of postdocs all around the world, but not necessarily at the university that you're in. So looking at the UX, you know, there was like more jobs in UX in Portugal than there was like postdoc academic jobs in Portugal that would also fit to my research interests, right? So that was like one main reason. The other reason was to see the impact, and maybe I was tired of like projects that go on for years and don't really need to anywhere. So seeing that impact, that you do some research like in 2 weeks or a month and people are happy and they really appreciate what you do and what you bring, it's really like motivating, because academia can be sometimes like a little bit dismotivating, because again, we often take things for granted. Like, yeah, of course you can do this like statistical test, but in a company to be seen as a that brings business value, therefore we value you as well. So I guess for me, it was a mix of reasons. And I have to say that's also because UX research is in demand right now. Also, the financial reason was one of the things, and the job stability. Like, unfortunately, academia, you have to change postdocs and stuff, and you have to move countries. I was a bit tired of that. I love academic research. I love research. And so UX was kind of perfect for me, because it allowed me to improve some of the aspects, but still use the skills that I learned throughout the years in my PhD and before. So that's it.
Right.
I really have to go because the other meeting has started. Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah,
that was amazing. Thank you so much. Okay. All right. Hope to see you soon.
Any other questions I can answer like offline if you like to. So yeah, nice meeting you, everyone, and thanks. We'll talk later.
Really appreciate it.
Please.
Thank you.
Bye bye.